All right, we're on to our third guest from mini podcast series, and I think this one is going to be pretty special. We've got Graham Hamilton here. I'm not going to introduce Graham. We'll let him do that himself. But this one is a different angle. First one was a lot of fun talking about the lads rowing the Atlantic. Second one was with our coach Dave, and this one is more closely related to Movember and their three cause areas: prostate cancer, testicular cancer, and then mental health, which Graham has got experience with all three ultimately. So Graham, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good man. So why don't you just quickly tell us who you are, and then we want you to go over everything you just did off air.
Okay, so, I'm Graham Hamilton. I'm from Scotland, as you could probably guess.
We love it.
Been living in Hong Kong almost 10 years now with my wife, and I've got two little boys, Braden and Lachlan, twin boys. That's something we'll come back to later about reproduction and stuff.
Please,
Yeah, that was also an interesting story. But yeah, I'm a 3 times testicular cancer survivor, and I'm a current person under investigation surveillance for prostate cancer. So probably, and then obviously all the mental and impact that has surrounding that. There's a lot of stuff. So happy to get tore in and sort of.
Well, yeah, I think for me, we should probably start about where it did start for you, and how did you even think there was a problem, or why did you go see a doctor? Because as men, we just brush it under the carpet and it'll be all right.
That's
right.
But
it's not always all right.
Absolutely, and like we were saying earlier, we are all invincible. It'll never happen to me. And of course, I was probably at the age that I was, 27 at the time, when I got the first time it hit me. I was probably pretty much the same. But yeah, I had a bit of a pain in the right testicle, and then I felt this kind of a dragging feeling, which retrospectively I found out is quite common symptoms of testicular cancer, but I didn't know at the time. So went to the doctor. The doctor said this is probably, they actually did a physical check, can't feel anything unusual, and said this is probably just an infection or inflammation, something like that. Gave me some antibiotics and painkillers and said, off you go. If there's any further problem, come back. So a couple of weeks later, I didn't really feel better. I still had this kind of weird sensation, a little bit of pain. So I went back and saw the doctor. I saw a different doctor again, which we talked about the different. I had two.
Please tell us. Just tell everyone again.
Two doctors. One was called Dr. Love, and the other one was called Dr. Love. Completely unrelated, and unbelievably, I saw them 2 weeks apart. One was my regular doctor, and the other one was a locum. My regular doctor was an old grey-haired man in his 50s, but the locum was a 25-year-old blonde, and the prospect of having to drop my pants in front of her again was that was more alarming than the fact it might be cancer. So, well, of course, in that setting, in other settings, it might be quite good,
I get it.
Anyway, so back to the serious stuff. I went in and she said to me, "What's the problem?" I said, "Well, it's the same problem as last time." She looked at my notes and she sort of said, oh, right, I see. And I said, what do we do? I said, I still feel a little bit of a problem. And she said, in this case, the normal thing is to go for an ultrasound. So they arranged an ultrasound, and that took about 3 months to organise. But between the point of that doctor's visit and then 3 months going for the ultrasound, I could feel a change, physical change in the testicle. And that, as I described to you guys offline before, it felt to me like an acorn. So it was like, you imagine the shape, a round sort of oval acorn, and where it sits in that sort of cup shape at the end, I don't know what you call that the acorn sits in. It felt like that. So the testicle had this kind of swelling around one end of it, which went kind of all the way around. So at that point, I kind of had more of a suspicion that this might be a cancer or something. But so I did the ultrasound. That was the Monday night, and then 9 o'clock in the morning, you get the phone call. You need to come and see us immediately. So I shat my pants. Thought that was me. I might as well order the coffin straight away. That's you're on the way out. That's it. You've had it. Called my sister in a flap, and then called back and said, "Look, I need to come and see you and chat about this today." So I went back, and then they were kind of non-committal. They said, "Look, we can see something on the scan. We're not 100% certain, but we would want some follow-up, so we'll refer you to a urologist, a surgeon." So then that was the next phase, and I went to see this guy, and this was the real eye-opener. Was I went in to see him, and his opening line was, "So, Mr. Hamilton, you've got cancer." And that's the heart stopper, because that's when the C word has been said, and there's no going back from that, you know.
How likely did you think it was at this point?
You know what?
Or is it just hopefully I don't?
I think there was a lot of hope that it isn't, but I think at that point I kind of knew, you know, and this was going to confirm a suspicion. But of course, you know, it's just, there's nothing can really prepare you. And especially I didn't expect him to come out with the first statement as being. And then, of course, I sort of hit him back with, well, but wait a second, they said it might, you know, there's other possibilities and stuff. And he said, no, look, I've been a surgeon 30 years. I see this all the time. It's not a case of if it's cancer, it's a case of what kind of cancer and how we treat it. So that left me kind of knocked off a little bit. So the next stage was to get some blood tests and x-rays. And he said at the time, he said from his experience, he would put a bet that it was a seminoma stage 1. So the normal treatment for testicular cancer is they always remove the testicle. They never do a biopsy because there's a risk of it going into your bloodstream and spreading to other parts of your body. So they removed it, and of course they tell you at the time, look, if it's a healthy testicle, sorry for that, you've got another one, you've got a spare part, you know, so, but we think it is, and so I was happy for them to do that. And they did the biopsy and they came back and said, yep, absolutely, it's seminoma stage 1, just like the guy said. Then the next stage after that is they do what's called adjuvant radiotherapy, which is a preventative measure, and that's basically a strip which runs from your lower spine basically up to around about your heart area. It's called para-aortic strip, and they zap that with radiation for 15 sessions, and that's to, if there is any spread or if it's sort of got out the bottle, then they hope to kill it immediately from there. So that was basically the first round, if you like, first battle number 1. Wow. So, and then you want to know more about that? Any questions about that?
I think tell us about what that was like anyway.
Yeah, so that, I mean, that was, and yeah, the radiotherapy, of course, I went for the first day, couple of seconds on the machine, you know, 17 seconds I think I counted at the time, and they gave you some medication, said people feel sometimes a bit nauseous and whatever, here's some medication if you feel nauseous, and off you go. And I felt nothing from the radiotherapy, and I went away home and I sat around for a couple of hours. I felt nothing, had my dinner, and then sort of about half an hour later, I broke into this terrible sweat, and I started to feel really ill. And I went, oh God. And then I ran to the bathroom and turned myself inside out, vomited all over the place. And it was literally like, fuck. It's like, oh my God. I was like, I never expected that, and I didn't know it would come like that and it'd be so soon. So I took the medicine. I even called the NHS 24, said, can I take extra? And they were like, yeah, go ahead. So I went back the next day and saw, of course I had to do the radiotherapy the next day, and I saw the sort of nurse in charge there, and she said, how are you doing? And all that. I said, I'm fucking dying. It's like, this stuff I can't handle. Yeah, it's like, that's one night and you want me to do this 14 more times? I said, no way.
So you did 15
sessions in total.
But in a row, like how does that look?
What they do is they give you it over 3 weeks, and you get a weekend off, a wee break in between. So 5 days, 5 days, 5 days, and they give you a couple of days to recover. I mean, the worst side effect would have been the nausea and the vomiting, but then they gave me another medicine which really calmed that all down, and I felt completely fine after that. And then the only other side effect was really just tiredness, fatigue. Yeah. But once that had finished, I recovered quite quickly from that. I mean, it's only fatiguing for maybe another couple of weeks after the treatment, and then off you go. And then you get into the observation phase, which is CT scans and x-rays, and that will last for 5 years basically. The first couple of years it's CT, and then once you're out of the real danger zone, they continue with x-rays, chest x-rays, because if you did get it and it reoccurred, it would eventually spread into your chest and it would appear on an x-ray. So that's, but and because it's a slow growing and not particularly aggressive cancer, they're not worried if it shows up at that stage on an x-ray, because then they'll just give you more treatment and they'll be able to sort it out, even though it sounds really terrible. Oh my God, it spread to your lungs and stuff. But it was explained that it's not that serious, and that's the best way to handle it. But then after 5 years, just before the 5 year stage, the sort of safe zone, I got exactly the same on my second testicle. Same feeling, same pain. And this time I was living in Africa at the time, in Botswana, and so off to see a private radiologist. They did the ultrasound again, same result, back to see the consultant, and yeah, we think this is the same thing, but at least they said we don't think this is a repeat. It's not a recurrence. It's a new one. It's an actual new cancer again, which is better because it's easier to treat. So same treatment again. You have to, testicle gets weaked out, and that's one of the things I didn't mention before is at that point they're like, you have to go to sperm bank and put your sperm on ice, because if in future you want to have a family, that's the only way you're going to be able to do it, through IVF. So I did that, and it's just like what you'd imagine. You go down to this little room, and you've got a nice wee selection of magazines and video and stuff like that, and they give you a cup, and of course that's most men would think that's an absolute dream. It's like go to you don't have to buy your own, go and use somebody else's. But the funny part with that one was when I came back, I went, you've got this little cup in your hand with your donation for the bank and deposit, should I say, and you go to the desk to hand it in, and of course I've kind of got it in my hand down at my side, sort of surreptitious, and I went up to the nurse and I said, I'm finished, I've got my thing, which she immediately picked up and held up to the light and had a look, and everybody in the corridor could see, and I'm dying on the spot thinking, oh my God, it's like fucking hell. But everybody's there doing the same thing, and it's day in, day out, and it's all matter of routine. So it's...
Sorry, just on that quickly. Mm-hmm. Did you do that once?
No, I think I went about 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that.
They take a good sample.
You'd hope that.
Yeah, that's right. You've got to, at that stage you're not yet firing blanks, so you've got to make sure you put plenty in the bank for the future. And also because if you do IVF, every time you do it, they're going to use some of it, so they've got to have a decent amount. So, so I think it was about 3 or 4 times, and that was quite good at the time because I was actually working, so I was taking time off work to go and do that, and I was getting paid to do it, So, class. So that's what they do, and then of course you get the second one had to get whipped off. They did the biopsy and same thing. Now at that point they said, we can't give you any more radiation. We've already given you as much. You're already glowing in the dark. No more options. So they said there's a 20% chance of reoccurrence. But so we just put you under monitoring again. So I went under the monitoring for, I think I lasted about 3 years after that. And then on a CT scan, as I said to you guys offline, one of the doctors, I don't know how they spot it, it's like a millimetre of difference in one of the lymph nodes in my lower back. And the consultant that had been looking after me the whole time said, I reckon that's cancer. We can't do a biopsy. There's no way to confirm it. But
was this over in Hong Kong now? Or
no, I was back in UK at the time. So that was actually it was picked up CT scan in Edinburgh, and he just said again, sort of based on his his knowledge and his experience, he said there's no way we can confirm this for sure. And then, but we're going to give you chemotherapy this time, and that'd be 3 months regime. So it's basically 3 months, and you do what was it supposed to? It was supposed to be 9 days as an inpatient, 3, 3, and 3, and I ended up 27 days in hospital over that period instead of 9, because I had all kinds of complications with infections. Something that
is this because your body is being like so shot, like your immune system?
Yeah, it gets absolutely battered to pieces.
Anything that, I mean, you hear stuff in hospitals where people get cross transmission of getting colds or whatever it is. Yeah, I don't know what happens.
Yeah, so it's really you're absolutely correct, and that's your immune system gets an absolute hammering. And what you do is you go after about 7 days of the chemotherapy, you get into the state which is called neutropenia, which is basically when your immune system goes to almost zero. And of course, at that point, anything that's around, like a virus or a bacteria or something, you are completely defenseless. And that's what happened to me on every occasion when I hit that point. I got an infection. And in fact, the second time round, because of all the hassle the first time, the doctor said, look, after the chemotherapy, we're going to give you antibiotics. Before even there's any infection, we'll give you that as a sort of a preemptive strike. we're also going to give you this stuff called PEG CSF, which is an injection. You take a little injection, you put in your stomach, and that's to sort of boost your strength and make
system,
you. So they gave me all that, and then after 6 days, I was back in the hospital. It never worked, and and it was really funny because it was like I ended up, you go, there's a process to get in, and of course this doctor that I'd known from the past couple of months, who's like, "Oh, Mr. Hamilton, you're back again. We've got your bed ready for you." It's like, and so it's literally. But I think this is fairly common with these types of treatment. A lot of people get these kind of infections and stuff, and they have to go into the hospital to get sort of patched up again before they kick you out. So,
I mean, testament to your character, and I know you're saying it in a light-hearted way, but please tell us about how tough it actually was as well.
So and that's the kind of thing, and you know what, the one sort of caveat I would put here is that I don't want to scare anybody, because that treatment, I mean, I finished with cancer in 2010, and here I am in 2022, 23, nearly almost. 23, almost, So, I wouldn't be sat here living alive today if I hadn't had these kinds of treatment. So, but it's a tough regime. The hardest things, so in terms of, I can give you sort of a rundown on what I had in terms of side effects. Obviously, it was this terrible illness from what they call neutropenic sepsis, and they treat that with antibiotics. At that point, you just feel you just got the stuff knocked out of you. Lie in a bed all day long, you're basically on a drip, and you just watch the clock because you're so weak. And then eventually you feel a bit better, and then you get going. But I lost all my hair on my body except for my eyebrows. That all went. I got this what's called peripheral neuropathy, so I couldn't feel my hands and feet. And when I clapped my hands together, it was extremely painful. It was like an electric shock. So after I finished chemo, I went to a concert, and at the end of this piece of music, I clapped my hands and went, "Oh shit, that was painful." It literally felt like a buzz and a kind of electric shock. That was. I lost my sense of smell. I lost my sense of taste. My wife reported me to the doctor because there was 1 week where it was just really weird. One day I sat down, I ate my food, I went, it's gone. The taste is gone. There's nothing there. And people that have had COVID might be able to sort of, I believe that's a sort of something they get as well. But I couldn't taste a thing. So, and I had a steak pie at the time, and I was putting salt on it, and I was adding more salt until it was almost like a white mountain, and I still couldn't taste anything.
Really?
Like, God. So I'm like, that's not so great. So, but then I discovered purely by accident, I think the dessert that day was like apple crumble, and I went, but I can taste sweet. I can't taste the food, but I can taste the sweet sensation. So the following week, all I ate was sweet stuff, and so when I went back the following week, the doctor was like, "How are you, Mr. Hamilton? How's your appetite and stuff?" And my wife's like, "All he's done is eat sweets, doctor." It's like, I said, "Well, it's the only thing I can taste." And he said, "Okay, well, it's fine. As long as you're eating something, that's fine."
Yeah.
But I couldn't face anything else. You can't taste it. It doesn't. You don't derive any pleasure, and it's so that's kind of a horrible thing.
I think what I'm probably most in awe of is that you're able to act on what happened to you when it first happened at 27, you actually got it checked, and then when it was the reoccurrence in Africa, like for me, I can't imagine what that must have been like even on day one, let alone having the same symptoms. For me, I don't know. In my head, I'm always going to be like, I'm putting that off. I'm not, which I think is we were saying is a big problem.
Yeah, and that's the really important thing for people to understand here is that like most cancers, everybody knows the earlier you detect
You're here because you faced it.
I'm here because of 100%, and I caught it really early. And that's the thing is as well that a seminoma stage 1, that's essentially what they call in situ. It's contained. It's only in the testicle. It's not gone anywhere else. I mean, okay, the third time it had gone into the back to the the lymph node, but again, it was a millimeter of difference that they were able to pick up on, and that's the huge difference. And what it also means is in terms of what they're going to do to you and how they're going to treat you is based upon what stage you're at. So the further down the line you let it go, the more grim the treatment that you're going to get. It's going to, you know, they're probably going to go.
More's going to hit
Yeah,
you.
they're going to go to chemotherapy immediately. You know.
How long was it before you felt discomfort that you went to the doctor?
You know, I actually have to say I went quite early, like almost immediately, because I felt it was quite, you know, it was a weird sensation. It was painful. There was a little bit of pain there. And actually, the other thing that I noticed was that there was a sort of a firmness to the testicle. And you know, it's like people say, well, you know, I would say everybody knows it's your body, you know, you can check it, but you should know what is normal, what is not normal. And that's, you know, as I said before, you can go to Google, there's lots of different things. It's fairly simple to check for your testicles. It's fairly simple. When you're in the shower, you get a bit of hot soap, water, run it through your hands, run them through your hands, give them a bit of feel. Are they smooth? Do they feel normal? You know, is there anything unusual? It's sort of as simple as that. And it's hard, it's weird to say, but one of them felt harder than the other one.
Yeah.
So I went quite quickly, and that was, I mean, that made all the difference in the end game.
I've got a confession. When I was like 19, I watched like a program on Channel 4, which was, say, a story like this, where it was like, check yourself, and I checked myself, and I was like, oh my god, that doesn't feel right. But in my head, I was like, I need to get this checked straight away. But when I was 19, I was like, I'm gonna go and get this looked at, and I did go and get it looked at, and it was one of those things where it's like you described it earlier. And I was like on my back in a cold doctor's room, get my balls felt by this doctor.
Yeah.
And he was like, "There's absolutely nothing." I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, "I'm sorry, I watched this program."
No,
last night."
again, better than the.
And you know what? I think that people like you, that's exactly what you should do. It's way better to come out of doctor's office feeling a bit embarrassed than it would be to go and find out later down the road that you didn't get checked, and then it's a big serious problem. Yeah, absolutely. Go get checked. That's the advice. And you know, I had my consultant with, you know, who looked after me from start to finish for almost 10 years. And you know, when obviously I went in at first, I had 2 testicles, so they got sort of felt and rolled around in his fingers. And then one of them got whipped away, and then the second one got felt a number of times. And then that got whipped away, and even once that gets whipped away, they still do checks after that, check round about your area. So, and you know, I've been sat there talking about my wife and holidays while the guy's there down doing his business, you know, and you just have to get on with it.
I think the doctors, when they're on their like 50th ball check of the day,
yeah,
it's like in our heads, it's like this is awful, but
and for them, it's all it's a mechanical process, you know. It's just part of
not even thinking about it.
Yeah, it's something that has to be done. I remember there was one time when I was actually in the hospital, I think during the chemo stage, and I was getting some kind of check, and then of course the usual story, it's like, oh, we've got a bunch of sort of new doctors that are learning, do you mind if they come? And I said everybody else has looked at my balls, why don't they have it? You know, it's like, you know, come on, the more the merrier.
I'll
you know,
bring a camera as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'll sign the photo for you after, you know. So yeah, and another thing too that we haven't yet touched on is when they remove one, they give you an option for prosthetic. So you can opt for prosthetic or not. I opted for prosthetic because I thought it would be a bit strange and feel a bit weird without. And that's actually made from silicone, the same stuff that they make the breast implants, but it's a harder silicone. It's like a kind of a hard silicone. And it feels relatively realistic. It's a little bit harder than a normal one, but in terms of balance and, you know, keep appearance, yeah, absolutely, that's right. Yeah, I get me budgie smugglers on and down to the beach, you know, get the speedos on, you know.
Good man. You only wear budgies these days.
Yeah, that's right. Well, of course, my belly's so big it hangs over and nobody can see anything anyway. But
what was your process through then wanting to have children?
Yeah, so that becomes quite complicated, and when we got to the stage, we'd already come to Hong Kong by then, and so it's because now there's 2 of you involved. There's a man and a woman, and she's got her gear, which is all in working order, but yours doesn't. So, but of course, the sperm's stored on ice in Edinburgh in Scotland, and that's the first thing, is you got to figure out how the hell do you get that from there to here. and then you find out.
Do you take fly one over?
Yeah, that's right, exactly. You should get down there with your box of ice, and she'll be all right. No stopping, Captain, all the way direct.
Don't you dare pull in.
Yeah, so no, there's some very specialised companies that deal with stuff just like transporting COVID vaccines and all that. It's dry ice, etc. So they shipped it over, and I think the cost then was about 10,000 Hong Kong to get that from there to here. And then you have to
say that's cheaper than I thought you were going to say.
Yeah, it's not too bad. And so they set it all up as well. So it's like basically it gets hand delivered from there to here and goes to the hospital. And then during that process, the wife, you have to take her in, and they've got to stimulate her, get her to do, egg production, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that they will do to get way more eggs than normally would be produced by a woman. I can't remember how many she produced in total, so they did that. Then they unfreeze the sperm, they put the two together, and then hopefully it works. And in our case, we got quite a lot of viable embryos came out of that, because there's nothing wrong with my sperm. So the sperm was nice and healthy, her eggs were healthy, so probably a lot. Yeah. So
you could have gone to the bank once.
yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah, it's like, and in fact, there's still some on ice in Hong Kong. It's like I don't know what to do with it now.
You've had enough?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So the result of the IVF was twin boys, and they're 6-year-old now, and they drive me nuts the whole time. So absolutely no more.
My barber's just gone through IVF, and they've got twin boys on the way.
Oh, yeah, that's because
I won't tell him what you're saying.
yeah, don't tell him. And if you listen to this podcast, it's wonderful. They're great. It'll be wonderful. Yeah, no, it's great fun and hard work. And we going back to the IVF thing. They in Hong Kong they offer you 1 or 2 eggs, to put back in. And so me and the wife were like, well, how many should we put in? And I'm thinking of failure. So I'm like, well, if we only put 1 in and it fails, it's 100% failure. So I said, if we put 2 in and 1 fails, 50%, we'll get 1 out of the 2. But we never considered that 2 might actually work and be 100%. So all of a sudden we go...
We were banking on 1, not
we were banking on 1. And then...
This is a spit conversation that my barber had with me. He said exactly the same thing.
And so when he goes, you go in there and you get the ultrasound, and it's like, there's a little blip on the radar screen. Oh, and there's another one. That'll be the second heartbeat. And it's like... holy shit, in a good way. We're so excited. And we wouldn't change that for anything, but that was an interesting ending.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So happy ending to the story.
I think it's for me, I still keep on thinking like it's so great that you did the right thing of getting yourself checked, because like everything after, like I always think what you're doing has the ripple effect onto going on to other stuff. Like if you didn't do it from the start,
absolutely,
your lads wouldn't be here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I might not be here.
Yeah, exactly. Your life.
Yeah, 100%. And it's really interesting because now we're talking about awareness now, and we've got the internet and all these things. Back then, it was not a great awareness. A lot of men knew about these things. I never knew about testicular cancer. It wasn't something I'd ever really thought about or considered. But when I went to the doctor, I genuinely wasn't thinking, oh, I've got testicular cancer the first time. I'm just like, I've got a pain. You go to the doctor, you got a pain, get checked out. But then, of course, things started to unfold, and then I learned. Of course, you learn a whole lot more about it at the time. So
we were saying like none of us open our phones and Google testicular cancer. Like we were saying earlier. Actually, the only time I really read about it was the Lance Armstrong book, which we were joking about.
Yeah. And that's obviously Lance Armstrong aside, talking about who he is and what he did. Let's get back to the basics of the testicular cancer story. And he was crazy. I mean, I'm not saying crazy, but he left it until it was a very late stage. I mean, we talked about the size of a tennis ball or an orange or something like that. And of course, when he went for his CT scan, it spread to his lungs, his brain. It was all over the place, and it was a really tough story to bring it back from then. They can still do it. I mean, the doctors will tell you that treat testicular cancer. It's still very, very treatable. But, why bother? Why put yourself through the mill unless you really need to? So absolutely, we talked about a little bit about that earlier, Ben, that, it's really easy. Just go get checked and check yourself. Check yourself is the first step. And then if you've got any suspicion whatsoever, go see a doctor. They don't care. They see people, as you said before, it's day in, day out. They're used to touching and seeing.
50th ball.
Yeah, that 50th ball in the day. Yeah, so, and it's really it's really, really easy to diagnose. You know, they do the ultrasound and stuff. It's really quite efficient.
How much did the mental suffering did you go through with, you know, the physical changes to,
Yeah.
you know, losing all your hair like that?
Yeah,
That's awful. Like, you know,
it is, and yeah. So I mean, there's a lot. Yeah, the mental challenges, and it's really. I have to say that during it, I took it all in quite good stead with good humour. I mean, you can tell I like a bit of humour, I like a laugh and all that. And you know, I used to say I actually made a good friend who had stomach cancer beside me in this not private, but a 2-bedroom thing, and I used to say to Kenny, I was like, I hate this place, Kenny. It's full of sick people. You know, you're looking out, and I'm one of them. But you know, you've got to have. I think that's one thing you really have to keep your sense of humour. But yeah, it's very mentally challenging, and it's got a real ripple effect to all the people round about you. It affects everybody. I mean, I was saying earlier that one time when I went to the hospital, I was so weak I couldn't walk from the car to the door of the hospital, and I had to get a wheelchair. My old man was wheeling me in there. So you imagine the effect that has on all them round about you. And of course, you've always got in the back of the mind, is this working? Is it going to be a success? So there's that part. And actually another element, of course, is, you know, for men, it's like it sounds very barbaric, but the reality is if you get testicular cancer, they're going to cut it off. And if you get a second time, they're going to cut it off. And for a lot of men, I guess that's a big thing. It's like, you know, it's like, oh my God, that's what makes me a man. And so I'm not going to be a man anymore. My wife's still with me, so there's something working, you know. And yeah, that's an interesting one as well. When you negotiate relationships, it's like when I met my wife, I think I still had the one functioning one and the one that didn't work, and that's, you kind of got to say, oh, by the way, I've got a plastic testicle, you know. What the fuck, you know? I'm like, yeah.
Maybe this is inappropriate to ask. Can I ask at what point that came up?
You know what? I can't really remember. I have to say, and again, because
surely it's not a conversation opener.
Yeah, that's right.
Eating pickles.
First date.
That's right. I'm not the man with the golden gun. I'm the man with the golden testicle. Yeah. So it's. In fact, I think that it's one of those things that the prosthetics are really quite realistic. And if I hadn't have told her, she might not even have known. But you know, I sort of at some point I said, by the way, one of them is plastic. So yeah, and then of course a strange thing for her to be married to someone who later down the track, it's like, oh, the other one's got to go, by the way, and then the prospect of natural child to going into the IVF potential, you know. So yeah.
How did you cope with the mental struggle? You know, I'm sure the support of people, but did you have your own coping mechanisms?
It's hard to. Again, I think it boils down to humour and a kind of a black sense of humour, a morbid sense of humour, and you know, joking about what's happening to you. I mean, in fact, there's the day my wife, of course, I'll show you a picture later, but when my hair started to go, and I knew it was going to, you know, they told you, look, your hair's going to go. So I'd shaved it down a bit, but then there's this one morning I woke up and looked at the pillow. I'm like, oh fuck, it's gone for sure. It's like, and then I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh, definitely it's gone. And so I sent my wife a message. I said, hey, listen here, don't be alarmed, by the way, but it's started to happen, you know. And of course she never got the message, and she walked into the room, took one look at me and pissed herself laughing. But that was really, in some ways that was great, because I'd rather she laughs than cries, you know. It would have been worse. I think, you've got to have mental resilience. And I think really one of the really probably the worst things about the chemotherapy as well is you're a pincushion, a human pincushion. You get needles in and out the whole time to put blood stuff in, to put the chemo in, to drips and all that. That was probably the most mentally challenging. It's painful and it's horrible, and it happens every 2, 3, 4 days because they can't keep using the same vein.
Are they just coming in and literally jabbing you? Is it?
Yeah, what they do is they put in a line which is on, you know, it's like one of them drip things that you get. Yeah, catheter. I can't remember what they call it. So it's something else, but it's basically kind of like a catheter. And it stays in for a few days, but then after a few days there's risk of infection, so they take it out, clean it up, and put it in another place. And but your veins become resistant to getting pricked the whole time,
Yeah.
and it becomes harder and harder to find a vein. And I remember it was a male nurse came in one day, and we were trying to find one. It was actually on the back of my hand, just by the finger here. That was the only one he could find, and when he shoved the needle in there, I called him all different kinds of names.
Yeah.
and then of course apologised humbly after that. I said, "Oh, I'm really sorry. So I've heard it all before. Don't worry, you know." But that's really, yeah. There's times. The other one, the one day that I think probably came closest to any kind of slip or fall was. I was eating cornflakes, and by this point I developed mouth ulcers from the chemotherapy, and it was extremely painful.
Sure.
And there was actually tears coming out my eyes at the time, but it was more kind of frustration than actual crying. And this nurse came along and said, "You know, what's wrong?" I said, I'm fucking so fed up with this shit. My mouth is aching and stuff. And she goes, "Can I have a look?" And she had a look, and she said, "Oh, that'll not do. Give me a second, I'll fix that for you." And she came back, and she's got this stuff. She's like, "Squirt that in your mouth, have a," you know, and I put it in my mouth and I swallow. I'm like, "Oh yeah, the pain's gone away." And then a couple of seconds later, I feel like I'm floating about in the ceiling. And it's this oral morphine stuff called Oromorph. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'll have some more of that. That'll do," you know. And
3 more, please.
Yeah. And that's one of the really interesting things, is that for all the horrible stuff there is, they've got lots and lots of supportive treatments and other drugs that they can give you to deal with the side effects, so they can really minimalise it. But you've got to put your hand up and say, "Look, I'm feeling grim." But yeah, it's challenging. And the other thing too is, you're in a cancer ward. There's people in there that have got other kinds of cancer that are way worse off than you. And you know, you look around and you're kind of like, "Ooh, I'm not really that sick compared to some of the other people."
I don't think he'll mind me saying, but I'll say a good friend has just gone through cancer, and he's had radiotherapy and whatnot, and he thought that when he'd finished his first different radiotherapy deal, it was a liquid form of radiotherapy.
Oh yeah.
He thought that was going to be it.
Yeah.
It wasn't. He was told almost directly after it, and he was naturally feeling upset and down.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then this little boy gets wheeled past,
Yeah.
with no hair, and the boy was like 6, and he was like, "Well,
if he can take it,
that's it." And
yeah.
So it's interesting you say that. 'Cause
Yeah.
he was like, as bad as he felt seeing this little boy rally on, he's like, "Well, I'm going to rally on."
Yeah, and I actually believe that there's part of surviving cancer is also your mental attitude and how you know, your body's going to do what it does, and it's going to you're going to try to muscle through, but your mind has also got to be completely committed and positive, and as I say, humour and stuff like that. And it's hard because you know, you're being worn down, you've got all the stress and horrible things happening to you. And yeah, so it's really, you've got to really have a sort of a resilience and a positive mental attitude. And yeah, I mean, I suppose in the back of my mind, one of the things that kept me going as well was that I was fairly certain I was going to get through it, you know, because of what they told me. So that was kind of, I think, in the back of my mind, the driving force.
If you don't mind talking about it, how did that affect, I don't know, what do you do for a living? How did that affect your career and where you were at that time?
Yeah, so I'm actually at that time, so here's a positive story that comes out of all of this. So I got my first ball chopped off in 2007, I think it was. I always get 2002. And I had a medical insurance which covered for critical illness, and of course this is a very peripheral cancer that you're more than likely to survive, especially when you catch it early like I did. But the insurance policy doesn't care. It's like either you have cancer or don't have cancer, and we will pay out if you have cancer. So I submitted my documentation, said, "Can I have some money?" Said, "Yep, there you go. There's your insurance money." So of course, instead of spending it on a nest egg or something like that, I went straight to New Zealand, got myself a pilot's license, did a commercial pilot's license, checked with the aviation authority that I would get my medical and all that for that, and they said no problem. And then I went out to Africa, and I flew in Botswana for 3 years. And that's how I met my wife and all that. And that was, as a pilot flying out there, I actually found out I had the testicular cancer. So I had to take a break from the flying for a short period of time just to get the operation. And I mean, look, it's actually it's a day operation to whip a testicle out. It's almost, they do it almost exactly the same as a hernia operation. You know, they just a little cut on the side, lift it up, tie it off, snip it, and off you go. And it's not particularly painful or a problem. Except when you go over the road bumps on the way home. I told my dad, drive. He's like, I kept going, ouch. And he's like, should I slow down? I was like, no, fucking go faster. He's like, get me home, get me. You know, so sit on a cushion for a couple of days and then you'll be all right. But I think that, you know, that's just the swelling around the area from the operation. And with a very short period of time, I was back in the saddle flying, off you went. And then it was after I had a break from flying, I was back in the UK, and then that's when the CT scan discovered the third lymph node. So and after that I was really lucky. I went back to flying in Tanzania. Actually, we moved to Tanzania and flew there for a further 3 years. So
why did you go to Botswana?
I had a mate there, and you know, it's like one of my mates is like, "This is a great place. Why don't you come out and check it out?" All right, you know, game for a laugh, game for adventure.
Pretty much how I came to Hong Kong. I had a few mates here.
Yeah. It's always the way, isn't it?
Ask them, is it all right?
Yeah.
How fun is it?
Yeah,
It's very fun. Mm-hmm. So you're obviously a pilot here then?
No, so I stopped flying. I came out here and I worked for a helicopter company called Heli Services for a while in the office, and that was like most people as well in Hong Kong. It's like supposed to be a short term 6 month thing, and 10 years later here we are. And that I kind of fell into a longer term role there. And then as if cancer's not enough, I went to the doctor about a bad back one day and discovered that I'd got a fractured spine. And this was actually when I didn't know. If I was joking, I'd say a horse walks into a bar. No. Yeah, no.
What happened there?
No, so this is a really funny, strange one. I went in to this chiropractor and he took an X-ray and went, "Oh, I see the problem." Sent me to the spinal surgeon, and the guy went, "Yeah, look, you've got a fracture in the bottom of your back. It looks like it's really old." And he's like, "Did you ever have any kind of accidents or problems when you're about 15 years old, something like that?"
Christ, I can't remember that far out.
Yeah, there was this one time I fell off this rope swing and fell about 20 feet and landed on my head. And he said, "Yeah, that would probably do it." And so I've been walking around for 25 years with this fractured spine, not even known. And so they had to fix it up with a spinal fusion. Yeah. But that brought some sciatica with it, and I couldn't see myself going back to flying. There's no way I could sit in a cockpit for hours and hours at a time. I still have a struggle now. That's actually worse than cancer or chemotherapy or anything like that. It's more of a mental challenge because it's quite painful. But and then the rest is history. And I work for Cathay Pacific now.
Okay.
Yeah, I work in safety division there.
Mate, what else have you not told us?
Well, of course, there was the time I got part of my bowel removed as well. And that was possibly caused by the chemo or the radio. There was a bit of a blockage, which is a thickening of the interior. And that I had to get about a 10 centimetre section removed. And that was in Hong Kong as well. But that's just, that was, I think, largely kind of unrelated and not too serious. So.
Yeah.
And then the next thing that we talked about before, of course, now recently in the last year, I got a...
Yeah, please tell us.
So for prostate cancer, you have this thing called the PSA test. I did just a standard blood test, standard checkup, and they said, "Oh, look, the indicator's shown a little bit high here, so we think we should follow up on that." They sent me in for this, what's called a PHI test. It's got a scale of 1 to 7, I think it is, and I fall in the 3.5. So... we think you might have cancer, but we don't know for sure, not 100%. They did an MRI last year, they did another one this year in June, compared it. There's a little bit of a shadow, like what they see on an X-ray, it's a shadow in an MRI. So the next stage is they want to confirm for sure, 100%, which is to do a biopsy. So that's the next thing coming up the start of November. So they put an ultrasound probe wand up your bum, and that's so that they can see what they're doing and guide themselves. And then they've got this little machine, which is a grid, like a square 3D grid, and they put needles in, and it basically takes biopsies from all over your prostate, and it will confirm whether it's cancer or not. again, this is so early. I mean, I could probably go for another 10 years with that situation without it being picked up, and no symptoms, etc. So we're talking about what should you do, if you're a young man, and well, not just young man, any man, check your balls, give them a bit through your hand. But once you're 50 years old, go and get a PSA test. It's it's a simple blood test, and it will immediately tell you whether you're at risk of.
Is that the normal? Like, I don't know the stats on prostate. Is that the age you should do it? Is that?
Yeah, so sort of 50 years old and above. That's when they say you should start having a look into getting your prostate checked. Yeah.
How are you feeling, mate?
I feel great. I mean, I have no symptoms. I never. I never had any real issue. It was purely by chance. It was picked up in a blood test. And I'm very positive because I'm like, oh, this is better now because
Sure.
like everything else,
right?
Yeah, you go to Dr. Google and then you can kill yourself quite easily, but you go to the worst case scenarios. Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I'm talking about killing myself. You're the guys that are going to go and row, what is it, 10,000 meters or something? Yeah, there's there are easier and more pleasant ways to kill yourself, right?
Please tell Graham about what you told Dave about the machine.
Yeah.
With
What
your age.
machine? Oh yeah, there's a machine. My brother was at uni, not at uni, worked at uni, and they had these new machines put in. It was basically you take your socks off, hold onto these handles, and it sends like electric shocks through your feet and through your hands, and it tells you how, like, you enter your age, enter your weight, and it tells you what your metabolic age is. And all this. So yeah, my brother was like, "Oh yeah, look at this! Like, he's 33," and it was like on the machine it was like, "I'm 26." So he was like, "That's what my age is." And I step on it, and it's like, "You're 48." So I'm like, this is fucking broken.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I'm like, this is ridiculous. And my other mate stands on it. It's like, it says he's 22, and I'm like,
my lord,
what the fuck's going on?
Yeah.
So we know all about Google.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So you need to do this machine after you've done this rowing challenge. You'll probably be down to 10-year-old or something by then.
Well, we
or
did
60.
Or 60.
Well, we did do a VO2 max, but we came in all right on that. But we are going to do it again. I think we are going to have another crack. And the VO2 max was just going to see if we've got fit. Well, we're going to get fitter. But
We should.
Yeah.
I definitely think you will. Yeah. I mean, I can't see how you wouldn't. I mean, that's. I think you probably lose a bit of weight as well. But you're already fit. I mean,
you haven't
people
got too much to
listen.
lose. I've got a bit of timber to
Yeah,
shed.
I'm anxious about how much I will lose. I'm going to try not to. To be honest, but there we go. We'll just
See what
eat
happens.
more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. Get. I guess you want lots of protein. Is that what you eat for a diet for these kind of challenges?
Yeah, I think it's going to be just calories in, calories
Yeah,
out.
Dave-
as well.
Dave actually said sweet potato is like something your body.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But your body, you won't shit too much of it out. Your body just uses all of it.
Yes.
And he also said
Yeah.
Parmesan cheese because it's so high in fat.
Yes.
So it was like Parmesan cheese and sweet potato. Just
Like you can get a
great,
lot
that's-
of nutrients between,
Yeah.
with the smallest amount of food.
Yes,
If that
yeah.
makes sense. You
Yeah,
use
yeah,
most
yeah.
of the sweet potato.
Yeah.
one,
Yeah, that's right. Because sweet potato is a complex carbohydrate, which gives you long-term energy, which is great. Yeah.
You just need a sweet potato sponsor.
Yeah.
So all the sweet potato sponsors in Hong Kong, are you listening?
Also, Cathay Pacific willing to sponsor.
Well, unfortunately, I don't work in the marketing department, so I could not possibly.
Send them.
The one thing I definitely will do is share links with colleagues and stuff like that.
You're too kind.
Yeah, and of course, if there's any individuals that work at Cathay Pacific that want to sponsor you and whatnot, then that's another thing. I'm sure you'll be providing a link. I think there's already a link up there.
We were kindly at 20,000 this morning, and then I shared online that we were at 20,000, and then people very kindly donated further.
Yeah.
So we're almost on 25,000, and we're still 10 days away from November.
Wonderful.
Which is when people start to donate. We've not received the money yet, but we've been very kindly handed a very hefty donation from someone we won't name yet.
Yep.
A nice organisation. And it's not about getting big ones for us. It's about we'd rather, George come up with this tagline of drop 10, save men.
Yeah,
We'd
that's
rather
awesome.
100,000 people give us $10 than one person give us the million.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100% correct. And look, at the end of the day as well, it'll be great to get the money in and use it for all the good stuff, but the awareness you're generating and the discussion, the conversation, to sit and have a talk like this is also wonderful. And my sort of reflection again is that, these two types of cancer are very, very treatable and curable, but you got to catch them early.
Yeah. I'm so grateful that you reached out. I don't think many people would have necessarily. You just openly give a comment about your situation.
Yeah, and I can't remember how it popped up. Obviously on LinkedIn. There's LinkedIn. You should sponsor.
You must have shared it. Yeah.
Yeah, I did. But
but I didn't know Ben, so I'm not really sure what the connection was, or what But when I saw it straight away, I was like, "This is wonderful. This is great. It raises awareness. More people need to know about this." And then, from me, it's purely the case that I have a story. If I share that story, if it saves one person or if it makes one person go to the doctor, then wonderful.
You've shared it with us. We're not sure how many people will listen to this conversation, but we're either way for the next 40 days.
I would say that though, like on one of the videos we just made, it said 6,000 views.
Oh wow, that's awesome. Yeah.
But I think what's important is like we were saying earlier, like I personally would never Google the stuff that we've talked about. But the fact that we have a platform where we're able to put something out there that even if one of our mates, like if I saw one of my mates talking about this, I'd be inclined to have a rethink about how I approach stuff like this. Whether it's my own health or things like that. And I think if we can. Like the chap we met last night at Movember, who was an ambassador, was saying, if you can have a good impact on, say, 3 people, and one of those guys takes a bit of action on something, then that could save, like, his family was pretty much all affected by prostate cancer.
That's what he said.
No, absolutely. That's a thing. Yeah, for sure.
He said I can't remember the exact story, but the gentleman who had 3 sons, the father unfortunately passed away. From prostate, but he had 3 sons. They then got checked. They also, he said, like dominoes, they just all fell with it, but they caught it early enough. But then they are sort of telling people, and
spread the message
through the conversation of his 3 sons, and hopefully we lose less men.
Absolutely, and I mean that's the thing. It's like we sit here; these are awkward conversations. You're talking about your bits and pieces. Nobody wants to talk about that stuff. But the fact of the matter is, you have to have these conversations. And there's a degree of unpleasantness. It's quite. I mean, it's funny what you're saying as well. Is that nobody suddenly woke up one morning and thought, I'm going to check my testicles this morning and go to Google and stuff. But
I will say I know what I'm doing tonight.
That's right. Kidding. Yeah, that's right. And it's you don't need to do it for an hour, Ben. Just a couple of minutes. If your wife says, "What are you doing under the blankets there?" So I mean, look, it's and in terms of how often do you check? It's not every day. It's like once in a while. Everybody has a shower every single day. You wash, and all that. And look, going to the doctor for the prostate stuff as well. Everybody knows the worst part of that is he's going to put his finger where you don't want it to be. You prefer him to buy you a drink first, I suppose. That's right. Go back and see the guy 3 times. I'm beginning to think you're enjoying this, So, but yeah.
Dr. Love.
Exactly.
It's my shoulder. It's my shoulder.
Yeah, it'd be really comical if the Dr. Love from back in that day listened to this podcast and heard all about
Let's make it happen.
Yeah, that's right. Let's find Dr. Love.
Both of them.
Yeah. Well, one of them's definitely retired. He's my original doctor, my GP, but the second one, I'm not sure where she is.
Well, me and George are interested in it.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sure she'll remember it. It's like, But it's a bit of a shock to the system when you turn around and see a very attractive young lady and you've got to go but you have to have that conversation and, and if you're not comfortable with a woman, get a man doctor, a male doctor.
Do you, or did you share your experiences at the time with other people that were going through the same thing? I know you said you're on the ward with other cancer people, but what about people in your position? Now, was that even a thing?
That, and that's a really interesting question. I never met another person that had testicular cancer in that period of time. Not one. Since then, I know of one guy that I flew with in Africa who's in New Zealand. He's had testicular cancer, and he's actually done some Movember stuff, so shout out to him. He's a great guy. And, he also, I can't remember, he just went into the hospital for something random, and then they discovered he had testicular cancer. And another guy, I played in a brass band in New Zealand when I was there, and one of the guys in the band, he got testicular cancer as well. So, I mean, it's not awfully common, but it is, it's there and thereabouts.
Of course,
and certainly, and
plenty,
especially in terms of men cancer, there's only two things really for men that's different from women, which is the testicles and the prostate. And that's where you're going to get it if you're going to get it as a man. So those are absolutely things you should be aware of,
Yeah.
So, and like I say, it's so easy to check. One with the testicular cancer is just a physical exam, or for prostate is a simple blood test.
Yeah.
Really straightforward. And of course, your handshake with the doctor's finger, but I preferred the blood test, to be quite honest. Yeah.
We're approaching.
Try not to dial out.
Yeah. We're approaching the hour mark, and we like to keep it around then. Is there anything that you've not shared that you perhaps would like to share?
Not really. I think we've covered really all the key points. And yeah, I mean, it's just back to the simple message of, and don't be afraid. It's like, I think that, as I said, the big C, the C word, this is a terrifying thing. And as I say, even my own reaction when I had that said to me to my face, it's terrifying when we say the word cancer, oh my God. But the fact is, these two particular types of cancer are very, very curable and treatable.
Yeah.
So don't shy away from it. And also, like you guys said before, have the discussion with your mates. If you're in a rugby team or a band or something, like when was the last time you checked your balls? But, seriously have a conversation about it, and tell people as well that say, look, if you're my mate, if you're ever concerned, you come and speak to me. Just like mental health, physical health, whatever it is, people should support each other. And I think because it is, as I mentioned before, it's very sensitive talking about sex organs and stuff, people might not be so open and forthright about that. But there's lots of options. You can speak to your friends, go to a doctor, all of these things, lots of options.
Yeah, I think, well, thank you so much for coming in today. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for sharing your story in a light and humorous way.
Yeah,
We've had a lot of laughs here despite the heavy
the
topic.
serious nature, yeah.
This for me has changed the course of almost why we're doing it as well, or at least has brought it home that if the funds go towards helping men. I know the money in Hong Kong goes to the Hong Kong Cancer Fund for men who are going through testicular and prostate cancer, as well as then hopefully 5, 10, 15, 50 people are going to listen to this podcast and start checking themselves. So thank you for reaching out, sharing your story online and with us here as well.
Yeah, and absolutely. And one of the things, obviously the awareness is great, and we've talked about, getting checked and stuff. But in terms of money, there's still lots of things we don't know about prostate and testicular cancer, and that's where hopefully if we make some leaps forward, we find better ways of picking it up, maybe understanding why it happens in the first place, maybe we can prevent it. So there's lots and lots of good things that money will go to use, for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, wonderful. It's been a great pleasure. Really great to talk about, and I wish you all the best. I think it's going to be absolutely brilliant. Obviously won't take part myself. I'll be watching from the sidelines, but I'll be cheering you on.
We'll see you next week, though.
Yes, I'll be there with bells and whistles, and I'll bring the wife as well.
No, please do. And I'm sure we'll probably touch on your story when we say some words as well, because it's really drove it home for me anyway.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And it's great. I think it's really nice for me also that, from the other side of the fence, it's like I am a real person, and there are real people out there. Now you've probably had this idea in your head and it's all, but there are actual real people affected by all this stuff.
That's exactly what I mean.
Yeah, it's like a real connection. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Good man. Thank you.